The question, is great musical composition easier than great novel writing? Leaving off the issue of defining great, I'll simply point out that while novels are generally written in one's native language, in which one is presumably fluent, music is written down in its own language, which in the Western tradition consists of a way to write the pitch and duration of each note by each instrument, along with instructions and notations for phrasing, dynamics, and other indications of how the sound should be produced. But writing is not the same as composing. It's possible to compose music, great and otherwise, without a lick of knowledge of musical notation. That is, you can be musically illiterate without being compositionally incompetent. Most obvious example, the man who was arguably America's greatest songwriter, Irving Berlin. He not only composed by ear, leaving other people to scramble to write down his chords and tunes, he also could play the piano in only one key. Self-taught, he was perfectly happy to continue to plink out his songs in that key, except that sometimes the key needed to be higher or lower than the only one he could play, in order to make the melody singable by human voices, his preferred species. So he had a special piano made that allowed him to move the keyboard to the left or right, so that striking the keys he knew how to play would reach a different set of strings, so that he could play in any key without knowing how to actually manipulate the keys in more than one. And don't imagine that having heard God Bless America and White Christmas you know anything about Berlin's compositional range. He held his own from the age of ragtime and Tin Pan Alley to the modern book musical, and he had hit songs in every decade. Look at Always and What'll I Do, not to mention the classic songs from Annie Get Your Gun, and he also wrote most of his own lyrics, perhaps all of them, because he worked for years as a lyricist on other people's songs before he began writing his own tunes. Irving Berlin's greatness as an American songwriter cannot be disputed, unless you dismiss the entire genre of popular songs. But despite Berlin's example as a great composer who didn't know musical notation, the fact is that composing music requires a great deal more knowledge and understanding of structure than writing novels, which can be and often are quite messy and haphazard in their structure, without hampering their bid for greatness. No matter who you think the great writers are, and who the great composers, I dare say the great composers had to acquire far more skill than novelists ever do before they could begin to compose anything that others would take seriously. I've spent far more of my life in music than in literature, but despite many attempts, I've found songwriting and composition to be too daunting. Writing plays and novels, even poems and lyrics, is so much easier to do and to do well than writing even barely adequate music.